So that's the rear casing there. Last but not least, obviously, we have the power button, the headphone jack, the mute button and the volume buttons all there needing to come out. So we'll start with the little screws on the back of the power button there. Again, they're all different sizes, so try and keep them separate, because it doesn't matter. It does matter when you screw it all back together. If you've got different length screws in, then stuff isn't going to sort of butt up properly and buttons won't work. So those two come out. We'll keep those at the top, and then what we have here is the home button. The power button comes away. You can lift that off. And there's the little button and the little ribbon cable attached to it. Be really careful with these ribbon cables. And then also the power button itself pops out. You might get little tweezers on those as well. The power button comes out with its little bar on it as well. Remember, as you put it in, the bar sits down, down like that. Now, if you put the bar the other way, it won't. It stops there. Can you see that? It stops there. It won't go all the way. It won't go vertical at 90 degrees, whereas it will on the way down. And that is the way it wants to go on the phone, with the bar dropping all the way down to the bottom of the casing. So that's the power button. So the ribbon cable continues. The ribbon cable comes along here, stuck down a little bit under here, and then comes to the headphone jack. The headphone jack has a really long screw in here, so we're going to remove that. It probably needs no tweezers, but there we go. It's come out. Headphone jack then just sits back and pops out. And what happens there when we put it all this back together, I'll show you, but that headphone jack actually sits in and down underneath this metal bezel in a little groove. Going on further, the little screw there above the number 6 is the Wi-Fi kind of earthing to the casing. The Wi-Fi earthing screw takes that and that attaches or grounds it to the frame and everything, but that has to come out because that's actually on the bracket of the mute switch that will come out with this assembly. Next one there's a little screw in this corner. Is for the mute switch bracket on the right hand side, so that's going to come out. Again, they're so awkwardly sized screws. That one there. There's a screw that grounds this cable through down, that goes into the casing there. Essentially what you want to do, if you're stripping this all out, you just want to take every screw you can out. There you go, there's that one out. And then you're on to that's the mute switch bracket out, or unscrewed should I say, but what's holding it in is a little tab that goes underneath the volume, the button. There's 3 screws here that holds this bracket, so we'll undo these 3 here. One there. Another one in the middle. I think this is the same size. Yeah. And then one at the bottom there, and this is where it will all come apart. It should all come apart. There's these 3 screws. So what we have here now is the volume button sort of bracket will come off. So there we go. This is the case of the cable stuck down in places to the bottom, to the sort of the rear casing with this little sticky adhesive that we keep coming across. Lift that battery adhesive tab out of the way. Just gently peel the cable up. There's the volume cable, and then finally there's a small screw I missed in the corner there, holding the mute bracket down to the rear casing. Have a good look. If you've got to pull things, and you use, your strength, I think effectively something's wrong. So have a relook, have a recheck, and see there must be something holding it. It saves you breaking cases then. And there you go. There's the whole button assembly out. We'll leave that. There's so many screws in there. And there's the headphone jack assembly. And you've got the power button there. Cable that comes down was the headphone jack. The mute button there on its little bracket, and the volume buttons there as well. So we can move that out of the way now. So finally, obviously the mute button itself came out. There's the little mute actuator. That can go out of the way. Next thing is really tricky, and it's the headphone jack assembly. And the volume buttons and everything. Now, these are immensely difficult, so one thing I can say is that if you're going to change these, on the volume button that's already in there, there's 2 black circular discs, like tape. You need those in there. Make sure that if you're changing your cable set or anything like that, that they stay in there or they carry over, because they space the buttons properly and they won't work. The buttons will just won't actuate properly if that's not in there. So you must have that. We're going to come in with assembly. It's immensely tricky to do. First thing, just drop the mute button in there. Now the mute button's going to sit in its lowest position, so probably what we need to do is reflect that in this switch here. This is the hardest bit, is putting all this in. You need a million fingers, and it's yeah, it's quite tricky, but it's not impossible. So we're going to come in with the bracket. We're going to try and slide it in there, and then engage it into the mute switch as it is in position. Put a couple of screws in just for good measure to hopefully hopefully we've got it in its position. So what we've got there, yeah, okay, put that screw in the corner and just to hold it in place really, and then we can suss out whether or not we've actually located the mute switch button properly. Right, that sits in place. And we've got a relatively firm feeling button, but I'm not entirely confident that that's in place, so it's a case of backing that screw off, sitting it down, and then doing it back up. There we go. We've got the mute switch in the low position. We know the internal switch in its low position, so I'm pretty confident we've got it there now. Next thing is we'll start putting the screws back in. The volume button bracket comes over, and we can put those 3 screws in. And that goes over all the other bits and bobs. So we're going to locate that in there. We're going to come in with those 3 small screws. Probably start with the middle one. Just put it in gently. Come in there with the next one. Again, what I like to do when I've got several screws on one part is put them in lightly. Make sure they're all in and they're all located, and then tighten them up. So I'm happy with that. So we'll go back to the middle one. We'll tighten that up. Nip that up, then nip that one up, and then nip that one. And it's always good to check as you go. So right, okay, well that's got a good feeling there. And now there's 2 screws in that bracket, I can actuate the mute button and go, you know what, that's not spongy, that feels nice and clicky. We've got it there, so I'm happy with that. Obviously the problem is finding the screws that went out even in my little pot. It's knowing where they go. So we've got a couple of screws under there. Terribly fiddly. And lots of these cables. This is the worst bit, to be honest, the reassembly of the 3G and 3GS, is this it's a melee of sort of brackets and cables and screws just to get all this control set in. Probably the trickiest job as well. Let's talk about reshelling. Obviously lots of people want can I just have a new rear casing on my iPhone? It's looking a bit scratched or it's a bit cracked. Well, it's obviously they don't believe you when you tell them it's an immense job to do it, and we've got part reassemblies now that have got the chrome bezel and the volume button and all the halos and everything all pre-fitted. So that's not too bad a job. It was when you're obviously quoting for a bit of labour time on replacing this whole rear section, and it's a task. So it's quite difficult to get that over to customers, but it's not the easiest thing to do. So I think what we've got in place there, we've got the mute button, we've got the Wi-Fi cables now connected up, and we're going to put the headphone jack. Now, as I said earlier, the headphone jack, see that groove there that's right in the middle there? Now the headphone jack has a receptacle here. Let's not use that. Receptacle here. And it sits in that groove and almost clips underneath there. Sometimes you put it in and it sits too high. It's because it hasn't fed underneath there. It's like it's got to go in. So we're going to slide that in now. Hopefully, all being well, then you can see it on camera as well. If we can sit it in place and just push it in and push it up without squashing too much other stuff. There we go. Push it down, then push it in, and we know that looks quite flat across the top there. And it sits all nicely, and that hole locates. That's a good sign that it's there. Really long screw goes into the top of the headphone jack there, and secures the headphone jack in place. With my thumb, I'm also pushing it up as much as I can as well, just to make sure that it's in place. So that's there. The little 6 connector there. Just gonna lift it up out of the way, and there's the little grounding connector there. We're gonna pop that screw just to secure that into place. And then we're going to follow it across with the power button. Okay, so that's screwed down there now. Right, bit of debris there. Okay, so we're going to follow across, lift off the adhesive. Like I said, sometimes that adhesive would be off with the battery, sometimes not. Sits under there, push that back, and then the home button, the power button, sorry, keep calling that, just lift stuff out of the way. We're going to insert that little power button there. Remember what I said about the fact that one way that bar won't go 90 degrees with the button, and the other way it will. Well, where it does go 90 degrees, the bottom bracket goes down towards the bottom of the phone. So we're just going to drop that in there, maybe with a set of tweezers just to spin it over. Also, another little top tip on this one is that these should have a little rectangular piece of black tape on the back of them, and this again spaces the button out correctly and allows it to, takes the slop out of the button and allows it to press. If you don't have that little seemingly unimportant piece of black rectangle, bit of tape, I mean it's minuscule there, the button won't actuate properly, so make sure that's in there. Next thing, once that's in place, bracket sits in over there, and there's two little screws that secures that to the bezel. One in the right hand side and one in the left. Okay, and then you can just not nip them up when they're in place. There we go. Always good to check, like I said. Nice clicky home button. Power home button. Get me. Right, power button. And it's it's sat quite nicely as well. So it's all good. They have the volume cable, mute switch bracket, headphone jack, power button. There we go. Got it right this time. All in place, all routed, and all sat down nicely. I made it look easy. It is easy when you've got it all pre-shaped anyway. It's probably the most difficult job on a 3D to do, but there you go, it's in place.